Hope you had a great weekend or that you're 5 days away from one. I'm Carl Azouz. First up, a gap was bridged on Saturday between two sides that have been separated since 1949. The bridge was a handshake. The two sides are China and Taiwan. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou met in Singapore. It was seen as neutral ground for two areas that have been rivals for decades. Both Asian leaders sounded positive in the public statements they made about their meeting. They both say they want to improve their relationship. But there's a complication. Some Taiwanese protested against President Ma's meeting with his Chinese rival. Taiwan has an election coming up between one candidate who supports the meeting between the two sides and one who opposes it. So what happens in the January vote could affect China and Taiwan for years to come.
This island of 23 million people is a vibrant democracy and a U.S. ally that sits just across the sea from the world's largest one-party state. I'm Matt Rivers in Taiwan, officially known as the Republic of China.
And I'm Stephen Zhang in Beijing, the capital of what's officially known as the People's Republic of China. It's been called that since 1949, when the communists here won a civil war, forcing the previous government to flee to the island of Taiwan.
Both sides set up their own governments, each claiming to be the only legitimate rulers of the entire Chinese territory. Decades of hostility ensued. There was no travel, no trade, or communications between the two, and the threat of military action was a constant presence. But those tensions began to ease in the 1990s. That's when Beijing and Taipei came to an agreement on the so-called One China policy.
Both sides acknowledged, despite the existence of two governments, there was only one nation of China, and that paved the way for economic and cultural cooperation. Businesses from Taiwan have invested billions of dollars here on the mainland, home to 1.3 billion people and the world's second largest economy. And millions of mainland tourists have flocked to Taiwan after direct flights resumed.
Taiwan's next presidential election is in January of 2016, and that could pose a problem for China, because the candidate leading the polls at the moment is from an opposition party that favors Taiwan to become an independent state.
That's something Beijing simply will not tolerate. China insists Taiwan is a renegade province that must be reunited with the mainland by force if necessary. Both governments say that's all the more reason to strengthen communication and build mutual trust.
But whether that trust can be built in Taiwan remains to be seen. Many people here are wary of the growing influence of their massive neighbor just across the straits, fearful that their unique way of life cultivated over the last 6 decades may be under threat.
For 7 years and most of Barack Obama's presidency, there's been a lot of back and forth over something called the Keystone XL Pipeline. It would have been an oil pipeline carrying more than 800,000 barrels of petroleum every day from Canada to oil refineries in the U.S. Gulf Coast. But President Obama announced on Friday that it won't be built, at least not under his watch. Republicans spoke out against the decision, saying it prevents thousands of jobs from being created and eliminates a boost to the U.S. economy. Democrats support the decision, saying it won't create many permanent jobs and that it could hurt the environment. They see oil as a dirty fuel. The U.S. State Department doesn't think the pipeline would have been bad for the environment, but the president named the climate as part of the reason for his decision.
President Obama rejected the Keystone Pipeline, saying the Canadian project would have sent the wrong message to the world on the issue of climate change. The president accepted the recommendation of Secretary of State John Kerry, whose department analyzed the project for nearly 7 years. Mr. Obama acknowledged Keystone had become embroiled in politics, as Republicans said the project would have created U.S. jobs, while Democrats argued an approval from the White House would have been a damaging defeat in the battle against global warming. In the past, the president had said he would turn down the pipeline if it could contribute to climate change, something his own State Department concluded would not occur. Not surprisingly, though, the president sided with his own party. Here's what he had to say.
America's now a global leader when it comes to taking serious action to fight climate change. And frankly, approving this project would have undercut that global leadership. And that's the biggest risk we face. Not acting.
The president will now take that message to the upcoming Global Climate Summit in Paris in a few weeks. White House officials say it would have been very difficult for President Obama to go to that summit having approved the Keystone Pipeline project. Both the company behind Keystone, TransCanada, and the Canadian government expressed disappointment in the president's decision. Jim Acosta, CNN, the White House.
Some of our viewers in Southern California saw it on Saturday night, a bright white light streaming across the sky. Some folks alerted police, others speculated it was a meteor or aliens. Nope. The U.S. Navy says it was testing out a missile. According to the military, it had been planned in advance. It was a test missile flight launched from a submarine named the USS Kentucky. The weapon itself was not armed, so it couldn't blow up even if it had hit something. Los Angeles International Airport was aware of the test and says it'll be keeping flights away from the area until Thursday when these military tests wrap up. My old school dream job would have been town crier. I'd start off every roll call saying, "Hear ye, hear ye." Now presenting the Knights. Reading Middle School is in Middletown, Delaware. Thank thee for watching. We're posting a notice about Underwood Public School. The comets are soaring across Underwood, North Dakota. And we hereby proclaim our viewers in Wetaskiwin, Alberta. Queen Elizabeth Junior High School represents part of our Canadian viewership. At the moment, it's not possible to get someone to Mars and back alive. One of NASA's 5 active missions, called MAVEN, involves a satellite orbiting Mars that took more than 10 months to get there from Earth. Still, because NASA hopes to put someone on Mars one day, they're getting all the information they can from MAVEN and its $672 million mission.
Thanks to the space probe MAVEN, we now have some clues in the mystery of Mars's shift from a warmer, wetter environment to the cold, dry desert it is today. MAVEN has been exploring Mars's atmosphere since 2014, and one of its main goals is to figure out how and why it got so thin. This low-pressure, thin atmosphere, comprised mostly of carbon dioxide, would prevent fresh water from being present because it would boil at 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. On Earth, it boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And now, NASA scientists think they know the culprit: solar winds. They observed massive amounts of ions and gases escaping during solar bursts, like coronal mass ejections. Since the sun would have been incredibly active in its infancy, the prevalence and strength of these bursts could have had a tremendous influence on the evolution of the Martian environment and the thinning of the atmosphere. Scientists also observed a unique type of aurora called a diffuse aurora in the planet's northern hemisphere. Auroras occur when particles collide with the planetary atmosphere along electromagnetic fields. They're not uncommon. In fact, they've been observed above all planets with a substantial atmosphere, even some moons. But the aurora seen on Mars was at the lowest altitude observed on any planet. The unique characteristics of this aurora versus those observed on Earth may be determined by the very different magnetic field configurations of the two planets. As NASA gears up to send astronauts to Mars in the 2030s, they hope to gain further insights into the red planet's past so we can better prepare ourselves for these future missions.
You might have visited a corn maze last month. It's kind of a fall tradition in many parts of the U.S. This expands on the idea. It's a balloon maze, almost 6,500 square feet of inflatable misdirection. More than 80,000 balloons. The builders say it took 3 days to inflate them and arrange them, and that this is the biggest maze of its kind. It's part of an international balloon conference in Belgium. You really have to see it to know it's not balloony, and even when you do, it looks like a stretch that someone would get such an inflated idea as to float such an airy possibility and not be full of hot air. Whenever anyone gets lost, though, you better hope they're not on pins and needles. Their escape could sound a lot like pop music. CNN Student News hopes to see you Tuesday.